We are recording.
Okay. So, hello everyone. I don't know if you can see my face or not. My name is Devan Edwards, and I'm also hosting this alongside the beautiful Zay Faith, who is my partner. And we are accountability consultants for the Total Freedom Network. And within this presentation, we are going to be discussing how to create inspiration when times are tough. And we have none other than our guest speaker, Patrick Reilly, who's going to share this. So, as before Patrick gets on, I want you to think about this. What is going are you looking for something that's going to keep you engaged as a leader, your team engaged, your team empowered, your culture empowered, your culture engaged, and your culture leading with that internal motivation, with the inspiration that is going to push everyone through whenever times get tough, whether it's the financial markets going down, whether it's the team in disarray, whether it's new rules coming in place, new ethics that has to be followed within the company, whatever that looks like. Have a think about that and understand who you are as a leader in these times, because Patrick Reilly is going to elucidate and really bring to light what that gets to look like for you and how you as an executive leader get to do that. So we're going to be bringing on Patrick Reilly. Patrick, are you there? I know you're
Yes,
there.
sir. Good to see you too.
Yes, likewise. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. You know, there's a favorite quote of mine that I'll start off with, in that I don't remember the source. I learned it a long time ago, but what they said was that the only person who really likes change is a baby with wet diapers. The rest of us have issues. So to deal with change, whether it's personal or organizational, it's not so easy. It's difficult for all of us. If you look at the data, which has been pretty consistent over 50 to 80 years, as far as I know, when you make a big change in an organization, no matter what you do, at least 20% of the people will not get with it. It just, they decide to leave, and oftentimes it's much bigger than that. And that's tough. I personally have been involved as an active participant in 3 organizational downsizings. I have to say, after the third one, I went to my boss and said, I'm out of here. I don't want to do this anymore. Subsequently, I've actually been involved in organizing and orchestrating big changes in other organizations. So I know that it's necessary oftentimes, but fraught with difficulty. It's painful. It hurts. I mean, just that's how it gets. That's the deal. On the other hand, the world we live in is not static. It is dynamic, and that we still need to figure out what to do, how to create some new possibilities, how to move things forward, how to figure out how to get that first flower up out of the ground in the spring, because we have no choice. So what I'm going to do today is 3 things. I'm going to share with you some content from some of my most favorite teachers and mentors, from whom I've learned a lot of good content. Secondly, I'm going to share my own personal experience about what to do and how to do it. And lastly, I'm going to share, as we get towards the end, what I've learned recently from working with some clients who had to enact some significant changes. And we've mapped out, if you would, at least a litmus test for what you need to do and how to do it, and some of the best moves you can make when you have to create possibility from nothing. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So, Devan, can you roll on?
Yes, sir.
So there may be more, but what I've discovered over time is there's 4 main situations that cause a lot. People lose sales. The product that they've had for such a long time just doesn't fly quite as much anymore. If you look at the search space, for example, look at what TikTok is doing these days and how that's changing sales for the Google that were the leaders for the longest time. Oftentimes we follow certain people. A leader leaves. she or he retires, they move to another job, and all of a sudden we get flat, we lose our mojo because they're not there anymore. All of a sudden, a product or service that we offered, people don't want it anymore. The world has changed. The customers have become more sensitive. They want something. Or organizations decide to diminish their workforce because they're cutting costs. Those are the main places that happen where it forces us to do something different. Now, don't get upset. I'm going to give you some help with this about what you might do and how you might do it. So let's roll on. So, but here's what happens. People lose their focus and clarity because things get disrupted. One of the things that happens when people are emotionally upset is it triggers their amygdala and or emotional brain, and they get very reactive. Your amygdala will because it operates way back in time, it'll fire 10 to 100 times faster than your executive functioning brain up here. People lose their energy. They get flat. They get a little, oh, I don't want to do this, or oh, they're taking things away. And also there's this perception, which is true. It's perception, it becomes reality, as people no longer feel safe psychologically. The companies change the employment contract with folks. People get worried about speaking up and voicing different opinions. They don't know what the costs and consequences could be. So this is some of the stuff that happens that you have to deal with. But you can. Devin? One of my favorite books of all time is a sales book called Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. And the author stated two things. What we're talking about is not easy, but your own experience and the experience of others and looking at the data will show you actions you can take. Something I want to insert here. There's a woman named Teresa Amable, who's a Harvard professor. She's did research culminated in something called the progress principle. It's really good, interesting stuff. If you want, ask me later. I'll send you a link to one of her articles. It's great stuff. Did research in about 700 organizations over time, and they found out the single biggest way to motivate employees is by having people be productive during the day. So today is, today's Friday for most of us. I guess if you're in Asia watching in, you could already be into Saturday, but for most of us, this is Friday. And if I get work done today, if I get productive tasks done, what that means is by Monday, I'm going to be ready to hit the ball again and go at it because I feel good about getting work done. It is true for all of us. So that's one thing you have to remember. How do I do that? How do I make sure that the people on my team help them to get work done every single day? But there's more to this story. Devin? So this is what we're going to cover during the rest of our time. This is the four things that main levers that one can use to create more possibility. One is tapping into inner motivation of the folks. Two, enacting a mindset shift so that we are able to look at something we think we've seen a million times and start to look at it differently. The third thing is the learnings that we've had about how do you engage with a team and get people's attention. And lastly, some new information to me even on how do you go about building trust better with other folks. So those are the four levers we're going to pull. What I'm going to do from now on is that if there are questions that either you, Zay, or Devin have, or some folks in the audience have as I continue with the content, you just let me know and I'll stop and we'll play with it a little bit. We'll work with it. Okay?
There's one question for you, Patrick. So
yeah.
for staff, you're right, because you mentioned that one of the things that could help increase the productivity in the work environment is that they are getting tasks done. How can leaders support their staff and their team to be more productive and get those tasks done without micromanaging?
Well, I have a simple answer to that. What I have found to be the most effective over time is the leader has to define what needs to get done, because she or he is responsible not just for my work, but for the work of many people. Then provide some high-level guidance for and answer questions, but literally let the individual and the team members figure out the how. That when we're in control of our destiny, that is the single best thing. So it's pretty simple. The leader does the what, the people do the how. Think I could make it more simple? Now, yes, there's a lot of clicks beyond that, but that's really the essence of it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, definitely. Don't worry about how the project or the task is getting done. As long as we set the vision for them and let them know, hey, this is what gets to get done, and allow them to have the freedom and the leadership to figure it out, which will also empower them, but then also, like you said, help them figure out their process and begin to check things off to actually.
Yeah, no, that's assuming that the people you've brought onto the team are smart and energized and talented and can do it, right? But it's just like, if I asked each of you, how do you cook a chicken? We'd have come up with a lot of different answers for how to go about best doing that. But if you have somebody that you have vetted and you see what they can do, they need guidance on what needs to get done. They may need support with additional resources and such, or they may have questions for you as they work through stuff because they're running into some obstacles they didn't anticipate. But that's my generic rule of thumb, and I didn't make it up. It's just from observation and conversation and experience with people who do this every day, all the time. The leader comes up with the what, and the people come up with the how. All right, let's roll.
Let's go.
All right. So one of my faves is a guy named Dan Pink. He's written a lot of books, but this is comes from one of his first books called Drive. And the focus of this book was really on internal motivation. So we all have external motivations like the next promotion or money or space and all that sort of stuff. But that's useful. But what really gets people going, gets the mojo in operation, captures the essence of the energy in that person, are three main things that come from inside. One is autonomy. We touched on that, Zay, just in the last question you asked me, but I want to be in charge of something. I feel better if I have the ability to control certain things, if I can make decisions. That gets me going. Mastery has to do with my ability to do new work that I've not done before, that challenges me, that pushes me. Or another way to look at that is around, I get to build something, a service or a product. I get to create something that hasn't been done before or is a new thing. And gaining mastery over a subject, that's really gets me going. The last piece that he articulates is around purpose. Another way to ask purpose is why. A lot of people might know the author Simon Sinek, who is the guy who's developed all the stuff about the 5 whys. And so when I get clear about why I'm doing something and I see it attached to something else and there's a goal and I understand, it taps into what I have inside once that question's answered. And that question sits in the back of our minds all the time. Why? Why should I do this? Why is this going to help? Why does this matter? Somehow that question is very significant to human beings. And when you can tap into that, I mean, you can tap into these 3 levers, you find a way to get to the discretionary effort that people can bring to the game or the work or whatever it is, the relationship, etc. So any other questions from folks, or should we go to the next one?
Yeah, there is one question from me, Patrick. So as you're speaking on this, you're speaking on inner motivations. And for me, what comes up is a lot of the times you have leaders, they have team members. And there's often things not being said or things that are being said, but not being said in a way that is engaging or is really stimulating the inner motivations of the team members. So inner motivations can be have to lead from open communication, outer communication. Could you speak on the importance of communicating and team members and leaders being involved in the decision-making processes based on their motivations, inner motivations?
Absolutely. So, there's what you're talking about is kind of a connect the dots kind of thing, right? Where if you look at it from, I know, Devin, I'll say to the football that they play in England, right?
Yeah.
Like you play in England. In order to score a goal, you have to have somebody with the ball who has to pass it to someone. You have to connect with that person so they can do the next thing. So that's the same. So that's not a verbal communication. That's a physical communication. But you can't or you will not score the goal unless you make that happen. And so it's the same way where a leader of an organization has to find the way for him or her to speak to the people on their team so they get it, so they understand it, so it's delivered in a timely manner. And sometimes, it's just interesting, no matter how well we speak, sometimes the other person doesn't get it. So often I will have to check and say, was I clear? Did that make sense? Sometimes you have to get to the extent where what you're doing is going and saying, so can you tell me how you're going to do that? So you have to even check whether what you think is a clear message is received by the other person and they know what to do with it. They know how to take the next step. So just like football, right? Except the connection there is foot to foot, pass to pass. Here in the business world, it's more the verbal communication. And I have to do my best to be clear, but also take some other steps to ensure that what I've said is understood. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, it does. Appreciate it.
All right, let's go to the next key. I think we missed something on the top of the slide, but we'll just there we go. All right. So Harold Dweck from Stanford came up with the idea of an open mindset, a growth mindset first, I think 30 or 40 years ago. And many of us talk about this all the time. What I find is that people don't really understand what the heck that means. Like, you should have a growth mindset. And I ask all you, well, how would you do that? And very few people seem to know. So when I was introduced, Jan works for a company called Adaption that ironically is it's just based in New Zealand. I started to be able to look at growth mindset and be able to work with people and give them the way to actually create one or to build one or to facilitate one. And so what I have found is that there's 6 core components that you have to look at if you want to change your perspective or point of view. What are the beliefs that you and or your team are holding? What are the assumptions you're making about what's in front of you? What are the emotions that people are experiencing? For example, if you're making a reorganization and putting people on different teams. What are you afraid of? What are the people afraid could happen moving forward? What do I hope can happen? And then what is the story or stories that might be germane here that we can tell that moves things along? Okay, does that make sense? And so a way that I use this tool, if you would, is whenever people that I work with are looking, it doesn't even have to be a significant thing. So when you need people to look at something differently, I go through an exercise with them and literally ask them to write these things down. I then ask them to step back and say, so what's the overall message that you get from your thinking on this process and how much you apply that? That seems to help people break through and begin to see what was an old situation in new ways. Okay?
Yes, and everyone in the chat, comment in the chat. What does a growth mindset look like for you as a leader? Because that will be some great feedback. Because again, now as you're typing your answer, you get to identify. Okay, is that based on a belief, assumption, or story?
Well, I think they're all pieces of the whole mindset, right?
Yes.
So if you would, those to me are the core components of a mindset. Is that more clear, Devon?
Yes. The components allow us to identify, okay, what's working, what's not working within
Yeah.
within our mindset.
And how might I need to change that in order to look at an old or familiar situation in some new ways? That would be something. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we roll on? Sure. Let's go. Timothy Clark is an organizational psychologist. He's one of my new faves, if you would. And obviously, the title here is, this is what he works on, is what do employees need from leaders? And he's got 4 things that he's identified, and I'm going to talk through because these words might not make sense to people. So when I first read this thing, create thick trust, I was like, what is that? I've never heard of that before. So I thought it's kind of a cute thing. But what thick trust is, but according to Dr. Clark, which is really interesting to me, is the ability to be consistent about doing what you say, and then just doing it. So say one thing and do it consistently over time. So it's not like a one-time thing with building trust with people in one conversation. As a leader, it's being consistent about doing the same thing and showing up the same time and beginning to create certainty. And when you create certainty for others, they will start to trust you. So that's interesting. I love that phrase. Second thing we've talked about before, and his terming or phraseology is about inoculating with vision. And what he is talking about is this, that and this is part of what I have discovered a lot recently, is that when there's things are upsetting to people don't like that they now have to work with new people, or some of their friends may have lost their position. The possibility is the leader has to develop the ability to articulate something new and interesting and attractive, not pie in the sky, but something that will pull people forwards. The third piece we all talk about is honesty and transparency, and this helps. So let me just tell you a brief story about how I saw this demonstrated once in the most profound way. I was in a meeting with a senior vice president that I worked with. I was an employee at the company at the time. He was in the process of laying some people off. One of the guys standing next to me, the leader's name was Jim. He says, look, he says, you might find this hard to believe. He says, I understand why he's cutting my job and the people on my team. It makes business sense. And he says, still, the way this guy operates, if he ever offered me a job again, I would sign up right away. And my jaw dropped a little bit. But this is what this guy Jim said in the meeting that made a profound effect on other folks. He said, look, there are 3 things I think about when I communicate. One is I tell you whatever it is I can when I can. Secondly, he says, look, you've all been around, you've been in big organizations, and you know that sometimes in my position as an executive vice president, I cannot tell you everything I know when I know it, because we have to do some planning behind the scenes. There's legal issues, there's concerns, there's impact on other people. He says, so you have to accept that sometimes when I can communicate, I will. And sometimes you have to accept the fact that I cannot communicate certain things. And lastly, he says this, and it just still brings a smile to my face. He goes, look, there are 2 guys above me. He was like that 3rd or 4th in command in a 30,000 person organization. There's only 2 people above him. And I don't remember their names, but he says, look, sometimes Stan and Rob they look at what needs to be done. They have conversations, they do their homework, they make a decision, and they come and they tell me, Jim, this is what we're doing, go execute. And he looked at everybody, and they thought like Jim was king and he did everything and he was always the final. They were blown out that sometimes he had to just respond to decisions as well. And what I could tell you is that because this man operated in this way, he had the most unbelievable trust and energy from the people in this organization. He was a beloved leader. Now, let's say he was a nice man, but he was tough and he got stuff done when he needed to. So we're not talking about a pie in the sky thing here, but he was candid, he was honest, and he was transparent. And he let people know how he did that. And it really hooked people. Made tremendous impact. The last thing is around what Dr. Clark's research shows, is that if you frame uncertainty as opportunity, that's the last key lever. So we don't know what is going to happen. You see this all over the place with the AI marketplace today. It creates a lot of uncertainty. Many people are afraid. Many people are afraid it's going to get overused and misused and such. And for some people, there'll be tremendous opportunity because they will find a way to make AI useful, usable, easy for folks to move things ahead. Also, if you go back to the big economic downturn of 2008, 2009, all sorts of people lost tons and tons of money. There were some people who stepped back, looked, and saw, the rules of the game have changed. What does that do, and how does that create the possibility to do something? And they profited tremendously. The last thing I'll say about this, that I have seen this many times when there's big shifts in organizations. It's happened to me as recently as 2 days ago. What starts to happen is that some people that no one has seen, maybe because they're lower level, all of a sudden they pop up and they're in a meeting and they say something and people go, whoa, who is that? And what is she saying? I have not heard anyone who understands things as well as she does. And all of a sudden, there are doors that are opening for that person because they're being able to be seen. So the change closes some doors and it opens. So those who are smart, look to see what the openings are. Okay? Pretty. I mean, this is rock star stuff. And I didn't, I'm just telling you what I learned from somebody else. He nailed it. Okay. Any other questions before we get on to the next piece?
I think the what you mentioned about framing uncertainty as opportunity, I think that's very powerful. And so a question I would have is, how would you recommend leaders frame uncertainty and tap into their team's strengths and understand that not only their strengths can be an opportunity to lead with them, so everyone gets to be a leader within the uncertainty.
Devane, if you're okay, I'm going to punt on your question for the moment because I will actually have a good example of that. I think the next slide or the one after that, specifically how a leader did this recently when he had implemented very significant change in his organization. And as we worked through it, we came up with a formula to make this happen. That's one piece of it. Okay, you okay with that?
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Okay, so we roll on?
Yeah, any more questions in the chat?
There's no more questions right now.
Okay. Next slide.
And here's where I'll, and if I don't answer your question well enough or completely, Devane, you let me know, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So what we found, and this is a situation where someone literally made a significant reduction in force in their organization. And so this is the solution they came up with that really seemed to be the best possible thing to do when people's cages were rattled and people were disturbed by what happened. So the leader had people in multiple locations. Every time he individually went to every single meeting in 6 or 7 places. He showed up and he talked to people about it. So they saw it wasn't an abstract decision made by somebody up in the corporate hierarchy. It wasn't something that was just on paper. It was a real person talking to them about some real changes they needed to make because they had to run the business. And this is the piece I think that's hard for people to grok sometimes, is that if you're in a certain high-level position in an organization, you're there to run the business, whether it's a university or a nonprofit or a big profit-making organization. You're there to run things, and so it's up to you to make sure that the organization or business runs well. And so sometimes if the numbers are such, you have to make tough decisions. You have to connect that to doing it as well as possible and being as human as possible in that. So this is the way, by showing up in person and being the person as opposed to something abstract, that helps. The second thing is, there's research for years and years that the single most important person to anyone in an organization is their immediate boss or supervisor. So also in this instance, part of the approach or the strategy was that in addition to this most senior person, the leader of that team was always there and present to show their support, but also to talk about the specifics in their part of the organization and to answer questions and concerns. This is where I start to get into answering your question, Devan, is it's up to the leader to then begin, and this is kind of vision focused together. It's up to them to say, so now this has changed. This is where we're going to focus. Here are the opportunities. This is where we're going to put our attention. It's in this size box. That's how we're going to tackle that. Part of that also is to reestablish and clarify the boundaries so that people are focusing their attention on high priority things for the team. So again, by focusing on high priorities, and here's a test, going back to slide 2 or so, if they're focused on high priorities and they're getting tasks done and accomplished every day, what happens? Can I be a really bad boy and test Zay Faith and see if she remembers what I said earlier?
Productivity increases.
Because productivity,
because the vision has been set by the leader.
And they're getting tasks done every day. That's it.
Productivity, yes.
Teresa Amabile progress principle. So there I'm trying to connect again some of the dots from earlier on. So that's the boundaries piece. Also, what I have found again and again is that in times like this, if you help people learn how to build their emotional intelligence or their EQ skills, that helps people to not bump into other people as much, to think more about what they say and how they're going to say it before they say it, and to be clear about their audience. Just yesterday, I had a meeting with a client. He's a vice president. His boss's boss was having a meeting with everyone in his organization that went like 3 layers down. It's really the executive director leadership. And my client had said something. I was listening to him and I said, oh, well, you didn't think about the fact that there were some lower level people in this meeting. It was not just the vice presidents and above. And so they see and hear things a little, and it's jaw dropped and it goes, oh. So he hadn't thought about how the audience had shifted. It was somewhat different. And so to be most effective, he had to change a little bit of what it is that he was saying and how he was saying it. And it was so, and do I forget that sometimes? Yes. Do we all forget that sometimes? And is it a good thing to do your best to remember? Yes. I have nothing further to say about that. Okay. The last piece that I think is really helpful when you get through all this mucky mental and emotional stuff is to say, what are we going to do? People get excited by actually getting stuff done, doing. We are doers, we are makers, we are builders. Even if all we're doing is building things on paper, it's still what gets us going. And then the chance to do something new, to innovate, to change things, those are all things that tap into our, inner self and help us to get motivated and pumped again. I'm going to digress for a second. Just so the capstone, there's a guy I worked with for a long time ago. I remember he's a software engineer and he goes, oh, I can't take this anymore. I got to do something. Like I got to be a real engineer. And so he tells me, well, it's the good and the bad news. He says, because he says, I got a brewery and I built a brewery. And so I'm making things every weekend. I'm making beer and I'm building things. I said, well, what's the bad news? He says, well, my wife is really pissed off because I'm never home now because I got my day job and then I got my beer job on the weekends. A couple of years later, though, he sends me a note and he goes, now I got it. He says, I've moved on. I'm working at Tesla and I'm building cars now. He says, so now I'm happy because I'm a real engineer and I'm building things. So you got to find out, what floats someone's boat and help them to get the boat in the water and get it sailing and get it moving. Anyway, any other questions on this subject?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Did I answer your question from the previous slide?
Yes, it did, and it's funny because yeah, what as you mentioned about the senior executive being in the meeting, the senior executive director. It's funny because we have to understand other people's working styles, and so as leaders, it requires a certain flexibility, adaptability to, okay, who is this person in our team? Like, do we know this person, and are we able to edify their strengths and really invite them to what we're actually sharing and what they get to do as part of the execution process, as part of what gets to be focused on, as part of whatever the focus is. And so so I think what's important is that to engage, we need to encourage based on what's working for our team. What is a unique strength of them? How do they work? And also delegating. So it's like, okay, what's one thing that this person can do better than the others? What is one person that only I can do? What is one thing that can be done later? And so really being intimate with these points that you just made in terms of establishing new focus, building these EQ skills, and clarifying those boundaries is something that we've seen to be very, very effective. So I just wanted to add that point.
I'll just try to say that in a really simple way. Most of us, present company included, when we have the experience that someone else sees us, we want to work with them. We want to be with them. We want to play with them. Like that. Wow, yes. He gets me, understands what motivates me. He understands what excites me. And so that is, you laid out the whole map there to then, but I think just this simple piece is bringing the mindset of how do I connect with people so they feel seen. And in order to do that, you got to spend a little time. You got to pay attention. Okay.
Yes.
Simple, not easy. Simple, not easy. Okay. All right. Other questions, comments, or shall we go to the next slide? No more questions. I guess we'll go to the next slide then. How's that?
Great. That's good.
People these days use the phrase agency a lot, or the ability to advocate for yourself. And it's also what it is that leaders are looking to tap into when they're implementing and launching a lot of change. Again, this is one of those words or phrases that I think that people, most of us make like we understand, but I think most of us don't. But I'm going to hopefully provide a touch of clarity on it. So to me, agency is confidence brought to action. So to me, having agency means I feel good, I feel comfortable, I feel confident in my ability to make this hot dog, write this software, take care of the patient in my hospital, whatever my job is. I feel confident about the ability to do it and take action. So and take good action, take wise action. So it's about the feeling state and the mental state inside myself about my ability to do this, and then my ability to actually take action and do those things. That to me is agency, as I see it, is the key thing that leaders need to be able to turn the switch on, get going, and get the motor revved up. All right. It's just like a client of mine who's actively thinking about shifting jobs, big job. She's a physician. She sent me a note last night, which was the place where she's interviewing. She says, they really like me. And this is this is a big, very well-known, accomplished physician. And I thought it was it was kind of like a little girl kind of comment, but the deal is that in her current job, she doesn't feel really appreciated, and that she's not liked so much by her direct boss. And yes, of course, they're schmoozing her a little bit and trying to make her, but she wouldn't have gotten there if she wasn't accomplished. But the experience she's had from being with them and talking to them a number of times is why these people like me. They want me to come here. They want me to do this job. And that experience has activated her, excited her, and probably will cause her to take this job, even though there's a lot of complications with it. So that's what we have to tap into. Okay. Again, simple, not easy. I think those are my two key words for the day. Simple, not easy. Other questions or comments?
Would you say that there are some other ways, or what are maybe 2 or 3 other ways where leaders can activate the agency of themselves and the team? Because I think from the example you gave, what comes up for me is recognition and appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes.
Are there any more factors that you feel are involved or you've experienced that are important?
Yes. So not to be redundant, but if you go back to all the prior slides, 3 or 4, though all of those slides tap into elements that if I do them and do them well, I'm going to be able to find ways to tap into my own agency and the agency of others. If you go back to what Dan Pink talked about in terms of mastery and purpose, if you look what Jan Ryback talks about in terms of a full way of creating a mindset shift, if you look at what Timothy Clark looks at in terms of thick crust and in terms of comprehensive honesty and transparency, and the example I gave for the leader named Jim who did that and had people on his, and again, this guy had like 20,000 people who reported to him, and this was a love fest. I mean, it's a serious business, but these people loved to work for this man. He knew and he was an interesting guy too. This is back in the day when people wore suits to work, and he always had on suspenders. Well, you call them in England something different. He always wore suspenders. What do you call them?
I think we call them suspenders as well. You know, the braces,
yeah,
the braces, the
braces.
strap,
That's the word I was looking for. Braces, I couldn't think of that. He had braces in the top, and he was a big guy, very imposing too. He played football at Arizona State University, big, American football, not your kind of football, right? Big dude, and still, he was like a puppy dog, but he got stuff done, and the bottom line is he was respectful. That's my summary. So to circle back, all of those tools that I have shared already, I think are the key ones that people can access to activate the agency in themselves and others. So this is, in a sense, this is a summary. This is a one-word summary of all the, 4 or 5 slides of the content of my experience and that of others about how you go about this. So that answer your question, sir?
Oh yes, most definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Was this? Oh, I know. We got one more slide of content. I'm certain that everybody remembers or recalls Viktor Frankl, the I can't remember, Austrian, I guess, psychiatrist who was imprisoned in a concentration camp, I think multiple ones, during the Second World War. And he wrote a book that many people have read, called Man's Search for Meaning. This is a quote from that. It's touched the lives of many people, and I think he presents the ultimate in terms of figuring out what to do or how to do it in spite of very trying or difficult circumstances. And what he says is, yeah, all kinds of things can happen, and what you can do is you have the freedom to respond to no matter how difficult things are. A trivial experience I will share with you myself. Last Friday, I had a good friend. I live in Northern California. She used to live here. She lives in San Diego now. She was up here for the weekend for an event, and we have dinner. And she has health issues, so I specifically chose a restaurant that I like, but also I knew where we could sit outside. I get there, and as it turns out, there's little confusion that occurred, and they've taken the entire plate, all the outside seating, and reserved it for an event. So I'm saying to the manager, well, what are you going to do for me? Since he said, well, I'm back and forth. And what I realized is that there was a piece of the conversation at a certain point where I felt like it was necessary for me to do my best influencing to present the situation and to get him to fix it for me, right? At some point, I realized that all that was happening after a certain point was I was getting myself frustrated unnecessarily, because that was not going to change, right? So I felt it was, as a leader, as an informed individual, I think it's imperative when a challenge or a situation is in front of you is to look at it and ask yourself, what can I do about this? And that at some point you have to recognize about, for me, getting frustrated, getting irritated because they messed up my reservation was no longer viable. And I chose to do something different. What I did is I said, hey, since this happened, can you get me a reservation somewhere else near here? So he actually then took it on. He suggested 2 places. And actually, as it turned out, the place that we chose to go to was even a better choice. It was a new restaurant, and it had the most delicious Middle Eastern food. It was super, and it was fabulous, and it was lovely. And a couple of months from now, when other people find out about this place, I'll never be able to get in there again. But that's how it turned out. But the point I'm making here, to build on what Viktor Frankl said, is that yes, you should do as a leader what you need to do and take on the challenge and do the best you can. And at some point when you can't, and you see that that's an immovable object, choose to respond differently, see what else you can do to move things forward. Because what they pay you to do is to figure out solutions to situations that are hard. Okay? So that's all I got to say at the moment, unless you got questions for me.
Powerful. So I do. So there is a question. So considering this quote, what are some strategies that you feel, alongside that example that you gave, can support the leaders on this call, or leaders, anyone watching, to embrace the freedom to choose how they respond? So, for example, in your case, what you did is you took initiative, you led by example, you had the ability to adapt. What are some things that we as leaders can do to really drive that resilience within our organization, within ourselves as well, no matter whichever the situation is, that may occur? What would you say to that?
Well, I'll give you a general beginning way to think about it. And then, of course, it all changes given the specifics of the context and the situation. But I'll parse that into two pieces, Van. One is, first is I have to notice what's going on, right? What's happening inside of me, what's happening out there. Literally, I have to have my eyes and ears open to use one of the clothes. So I have to be able to read the tea leaves. Okay.
Yeah.
Then it's a small step away, but I move from noticing to noting or examine. So I go, oh, what's happening is the way that I usually say this, that's not working. Or I notice that some of the people in the room are responding well, but the other people are not. So I then go and say, okay, so what am I going to do now? So literally it's two small little mental steps, but very profound. So there's that piece. And then I have to look at who's out there. So that's for me. That happens all here. And then I ask myself, so what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I experiencing? And then what makes sense to do about that now? Right? And so one answer might be, well, nothing today. I just noticed there's noise, but I got to pay attention to it. Or I have to respond to this person. Or I have to respond to those who are on the sales team who seem to feel most uncomfortable with what happened. Or I have to go and I have to retrieve some data that I don't have available, and I have to get it to people so that, because understanding the data behind what I'm suggesting in a better way will calm more people down. So there's three essential steps, if you would. I notice, I note, and then I look out there and ask myself, what am I seeing? Those four steps: seeing, hearing, experiencing, and then what am I going to do about that? Right? It's triggered an old memory for me, which is that I remember once doing a facilitation at a power plant, kind of a rough and tumble sort of place. And the management wanted me there. But I got there and I was with the people who basically ran the plant. I actually don't remember the subject at all. But what happened is one of the guys who was a fairly high level, not the senior management team, but the next level down, that's all the people I was with. And he just set the tone for the place. And literally he stood up and he got in my face, like literally like nose to nose. And I'm thinking, well, Patrick, your nose looks pretty good. Maybe you might have a remodeling job here. And I talked to him and I said, look, I can remember his name. I said, so this is not going to work here. So I need you to calm down and I need you to sit down and then we'll get on with the conversation. And if you want to talk to me about this offline later, let's go do that. But right now, that's not happening. And thank God this did occur. He did actually take what I was saying and he sat himself down, went back to his seat. And because he was the tone setter, everything changed and they all listened a lot to what I had to say, took it in and did something with it. A month later, something else that blew my mind, and this gets back to sort of just do the right thing.
Yeah.
I'm in my office in San Francisco. There's a knock, the same guy shows up. I'm like, oh, what's going on now? He says, can I sit down? And I said, yes, you may. And he says, I want to thank you for saving my career. I almost fell out of my chair. And he said, I realized from talking to you that day in front of they were all guys, as the case may be, at the plant, that what I was doing and how I was acting was going to derail my career and maybe get me fired. And you staying with me, being steady, being clear about your point of view and what was okay and what was not okay, and doing it in a respectful manner, I saw the world differently. So I remember incidents like that when I don't know what to do, and I call on what I figured out sometimes with a lot of luck, what works. So that's my best answer to your question, my friend. How's that?
That was a great answer. Thank you for sharing that experience. That's powerful.
And I'm very happy my nose looks good today too. So I was legitimately concerned because he looked like he could have really popped me. So anyway.
Patrick, in closing, what are some last tips or messages or lessons that you would like to share? We know we're gonna have a lot of people watching the replay. So, what are some last inspiration that you would like to share for people, leaders who are looking to create inspiration in rough times in their workplace and also in life right now?
Well, I think I just said it, which is do the right thing, be respectful. I'll go back to build your own ability to notice what's going on, step back, note what that is and what that means right now, then look out there to the other people and ask yourself, what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I experiencing? And then what's the right thing for me to do with that? I can't make it more simple than that. And yes, there's a lot of stuff behind that, but that's the real deal. And then of course, go back and look at the rest of the content I provided. But I think there's a lot of really useful information there, weaned from the people who I think have done some of the most significant work about how do you create possibility for yourself and others when times are tough and things are difficult. We don't have a choice. You can't just go roll over, lie down and play dead. You got to figure out what you can do regardless of how difficult things are. And those are, from my experience, I just laid out some of my biggest key tips for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be able to tell how this gets me excited. And I just love to try to figure this stuff out. Okay. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. We're going to open up with questions here in a moment, but I also just want you to share. We have your your information for people to find you and work with you deeper so you can come in and support their organizations. Could you tell a little bit for the people who don't know you or just need a refresher of who you are? Tell people a little bit about, what the work that you do and how you can best support them in their organization.
Well, I can't answer the last part of that yet until I talk to them. But what I would say is my work is twofold. It's interesting. It's gone through a cycle. I started out originally as an organizational consultant on a very, very big project and continued to do that for a period of time. As I told you when we talked before, one of the things that happened over time with me is that I was actually with a client one day somewhere, and I just didn't know what to do. And somebody said to me, well, maybe those guys could use some coaching. And I said, what's that? Like literally, I did not know what it was. And then I just, thought about it from a sports perspective. Like I thought that's what we were talking about, but I got, oh, really? People pay people to do that? And that was my friend Donald Sewell says, yeah, they pay people to do that. I was like, wow, okay, cool. And then I sort of started to get interested in it. And I've been, learning, training, and doing that kind of stuff for the last 25 years or so. So I've had I hit the ball a couple of times. And so now my work is really, twofold. I will work with teams and organizations to do things, to move things for them. And then I do a lot of individual coaching. And quite frankly, we talked about the impact of the pandemic on people's lives. Before the pandemic, my work was really a combination of those organizational and teamwork and individual coaching. As a result of when the world closed down, opportunities showed up that just put me much more in a just exclusive coaching world and universe. And now as the world is moving back, thank goodness, a little more into the old ways, bringing back more of that other stuff that I used to do before. So that's my shtick. Okay, does that help?
Yes, sir.
You two have the best smiles, I gotta say. Like from both
That's true.
South Carolina and England,
True,
it's like lovely smiles. I don't know. You got
must be better lighting or something.
it must be some kind of smile training you two took or something. No matter what it is.
Smile training.
That's the next thing. You should get somebody on to do some
Smile
smile
training.
training.
That's a joke.
Yeah, maybe that's
It's great to see you, Michael. Do you have any questions or comments for Patrick?
Of course, yeah. So first of all, I'm so sorry I had something at 9 that I had to do. So I'll look forward to your recording. I'll just mention Patrick is my coach, and anybody who might be listening to this recording, you just ask them kind of what does he do and how does he help people. And I would say that, Patrick, you have a pretty unique combination of courage that allows you to get into heavy lifting with your clients when that's what they need to do. You have a gentleness and a kindness that's a pretty special combination. And I'll just say that knowing you many years now as a person and appreciating your coaching and your modeling also, you didn't use the word pivot, but your clients need to pivot. You know how to pivot. You just pivoted, man. And you did it smart and you did it well, and it wasn't easy and everything wasn't perfect. But as a person, Patrick, again, it's hard to kind of trust and build credibility with a consultant really quickly. And all the executive teams and all the leaders I know are going to pick up a vibe. And, obviously after that, you've got to perform and create value and do all those things. But Patrick, in today's world, you don't get a lot of time and stuff. And so you can trust him. He's solid wood. This is not veneer, this fellow. No, I mean,
did you guys pay him for this? Anyway, thank you, Michael. Go ahead.
No, I feel like man for being late. Anyway, so I will certainly find the time to hear about it. But when you think about this is a niche for you. This is not the generic thing that everybody does. And when you do have a situation, and unfortunately, it's not an if, it's a when. When you are in a very difficult situation, that's going to happen. I mean, it happens to me. It happens to everybody. It's the support that you can get. You're lucky to have a fellow like Patrick in your corner. That's I'll leave it at that. My pleasure. My honor, sir.
Hey.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were still be on, so I jumped on because and it's always nice to see you. So
likewise, always nice to see you, Michael. All right. Anything else, gang? You got them smiling now too, Michael. Look at that.
Let's check the chat. So, okay, so yeah, I just want to say, well, thank you, Michael, for sharing that. That's. I mean, our experience aligns with your experience. Let's just say that. And
well, it's easier in a way to just have, somebody's experience, to say. It's hard for you to say your own brand as well as someone else, really, and that's true as a leader, right? You have a desired brand, then you have a real brand. You pick your desired brand. The world tells you what your real brand is.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so that's my experience of the value that Patrick creates. He's a good fellow.
Yeah, I'll just leave with one more comment. An old friend of mine who had been a very, very successful insurance salesman for a long time, really a good sales guy. He made a suggestion to me once. He says, "You want to just generate some more business?" He says, "Go send a note to some former clients, give them some new content or a tool that you have, and then ask them this question: what is it that I did for you that was most useful and valuable?" And he said, what you're going to find out is very different than what you think. And I did do that once, maybe even twice. And it really blew my circuits in that I was pretty convinced like what I had done for Ms. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so was this. And what they told me was most significant, was almost 100% different than I thought.
mm.
All right. So impact is perceived differently. Clearly, if you're going to bring somebody in to help you in your organization, you're asking them to do something to create impact, but how they see what is impactful is real different at the receiver end as opposed to the provider end. So I'm going with create impact and find out what it is they liked. Okay. What did good? All right, gang, are we ready?
Yes, most definitely. So everyone, if you want to connect with Patrick Reilly further, you can hit him up at patrick@resourcesinaction.com. And Patrick, is there anywhere else you would like them to connect with you further?
No, that worked just fine. The old internet is a useful service, and my deal is I am always get back to people quickly. So if you've got a question or something about what I said today, you want to ask me something, my promise is even on the weekend I'll get back to you within 24 hours, not minutes. 24 hours. Okay.
Love it, love it.
How's that?
That's great.
Yes,
So everyone, you know what to
again-
do. Contact Patrick and start implementing what he has shared with you today in terms of creating inspiration when times are tough. Ask yourself, what does that look like, and how can you be impactful, and how can you make it worthwhile in these tough times? So with that being said, we'll see you soon.
And make them
Take
smile.
care.
Make them smile. All right.
That too. Take care, everyone.
Cheerio.